The Isolation Protocol. The massive crystal dome of the Zephyr Alliance capital buzzed with the voices of 800 species. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood alone at the center podium, her simple black diplomatic uniform stark against the rainbow of alien forms surrounding her. Above her head, holographic displays showed Earth spinning slowly in space, marked with red warning symbols. High Chancellor Vextar rose from his elevated throne, his scaled hide gleaming under the artificial starlight. The Saurian leader was ancient even by his species' standards, having governed the Alliance for over 3 centuries. His yellow eyes fixed on Sarah with obvious disdain. "The motion before us today concerns the species known as humans," Vextar announced, his voice carrying through translation devices to every corner of the dome. After extensive study, the Council must decide whether humanity poses a threat to galactic peace. Sarah's jaw tightened. She had spent months preparing for this moment, gathering evidence of human achievements, contributions to art and science, examples of cooperation and growth. None of it seemed to matter now. Commander Xyloth of the Nexari Crystalline Fleet stood next, his body refracting light into beautiful patterns as he spoke. "The evidence is clear. Humans have engaged in over 4,000 wars in their recorded history. They consume resources at an unsustainable rate and show little regard for environmental preservation on their own world." A wave of agreement rippled through the chamber. Clicks, chirps, and harmonic tones expressed approval from dozens of different species. Dr. Kalin, her energy form flickering between visible and invisible states, added her analysis. "My research shows humans possess an unusually high aggression index. While this might have helped them survive on their primitive world, it makes them unsuitable for civilized galactic society." Sarah finally spoke, her voice steady despite the overwhelming opposition. "Honored delegates, you judge us by our past without considering our growth. Yes, we have fought wars, but we have also created art that moves souls across species barriers. We have music that makes even the stoic Grathani weep. We have literature that has already begun spreading through your own cultures." "Pretty words," Vextar interrupted, "but your species cannot be trusted with advanced technology. You would use it for violence. And yet," Sarah continued, "every human ship that has entered this space has come in peace. Every human diplomat has honored their agreements. Every human trader has dealt fairly with your people." The chamber erupted in debate. Some delegates argued for giving humanity more time, but they were vastly outnumbered by those calling for immediate action. Commander Xyloth's crystalline form brightened as he delivered what would become the most quoted line of the session. "Why should we risk our hard-won peace for a species that solves problems with violence? Let them stay in their little corner of space until they truly evolve." The laughter that followed was like knives in Sarah's chest. Not cruel laughter, but the dismissive chuckling of adults watching children play at being important. When the vote was called, the result was overwhelming. 847 votes for the Isolation Protocol. Only 3 against. Sarah watched the numbers appear on the displays and felt something die inside her chest. "The decision is final," Vextar declared. "Humanity is hereby restricted to their home system. No human vessel may travel beyond the heliopause of Sol without express permission from this council. No human may hold positions of authority in Alliance affairs. Trade will be limited to essential resources only, conducted through automated stations." Sarah looked around the chamber one last time, meeting the eyes of those few delegates who had shown her kindness during her months here. The plant-based Verdani ambassador touched his chest in salute. The aquatic depth swimmers rippled their fins in what passed for sympathy among their kind. "You are making a mistake," she said quietly. "Not because we are perfect, but because isolation breeds resentment. You're creating the very thing you fear." "Your concerns are noted," Vextar replied dismissively. "Guards will escort you to your transport." As Sarah was led from the chamber, she activated a small device hidden in her jacket. A signal, invisible to Alliance scanners, pulsed once toward Earth. The message it carried was simple: Protocol 7, begin Phase 1. 3 months later, President Elena Martinez stood before the joint session of Earth's United Government. The Great Hall in New Geneva was packed with representatives from every nation and colony. Outside, protests filled the streets as humanity grappled with their new reality. "My fellow humans," Martinez began, "we have been judged and found wanting by those who call themselves our betters. They see our history of conflict and assume we are incapable of growth. They see our diversity and call it chaos. They see our passion and call it primitive aggression." The hall was silent except for the quiet hum of recording equipment, broadcasting her words to every corner of human space. "Today, I announce the formation of the Terran Defense Initiative. We will not beg for acceptance from those who mock us. Instead, we will prove our worth through our actions." In hidden facilities across the solar system, work had already begun. The TDI's first directive was simple: develop technologies and strategies that the Alliance couldn't predict or counter. Human engineers studied alien weaknesses while human strategists developed new forms of warfare that the galaxy had never seen. Captain Ray Santos stood on the bridge of his modified cargo hauler, the Defiance, watching Jupiter's moons drift past his viewports. Officially, his ship carried agricultural supplies to the outer colonies. Unofficially, it was the first vessel in humanity's shadow fleet. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from Titan Base," his communications officer reported. "Put it through," Ray ordered. The face of Admiral Zhang appeared on screen, her expression serious. "Ray, are you ready for your first run?" Ray nodded. "The cargo is secured. Navigation routes programmed. We'll be beyond the heliopause in 6 hours. Remember, if you're caught, I'm a rogue trader operating without government sanction," Ray finished. "The story's memorized, Admiral." What the Alliance didn't know was that dozens of ships like the Defiance were already moving through space, carrying more than just supplies. Hidden in their cargo holds were human military advisors, tactical manuals, and most importantly, human ways of thinking that the galaxy had never encountered. The first alien to purchase human knowledge was a desperate Nexari commander facing a rebellion on a mining world. Traditional Alliance tactics had failed for months. When a mysterious trader offered alternative solutions for a reasonable price, Commander Xyloth's cousin decided to take the risk. The human tactical manual recommended something the Nexari had never considered: negotiation backed by precisely applied pressure. Rather than overwhelming force, the humans suggested surgical strikes designed to demonstrate capability while leaving room for face-saving surrender. The rebellion ended in a week. Word spread through underground channels. Soon, other commanders were seeking out these mysterious tactical consultants. Few knew they were getting human advice, but the results spoke for themselves. On the remote station of Kepler's Rest, Sarah Chen met with a contact she had cultivated during her time as ambassador. The Verdani called himself Leaf Through Sunlight, and he had been one of the 3 votes against the isolation protocol. "Your people are already moving through our space," he said, his bark-like skin rustling with concern. "The Alliance intelligence services are beginning to notice unusual patterns in recent conflicts." Sarah sipped her tea, a blend of earth herbs and Verdani spices. "Are they?" "Do not play innocent with me, Sarah. I have heard whispers of human advisors, human tactics, human solutions to problems that have puzzled Alliance strategists for decades." "And what do you think of these rumors?" Sarah asked. Leaf Through Sunlight was quiet for a long moment. "I think your people are more clever than the Council realizes, and I think that when the truth comes out, there will be consequences none of us can predict." Sarah set down her cup. "What would you do, old friend? If your people were mocked and isolated, told they were too dangerous to participate in galactic civilization?" "I would prove them wrong," the Verdani replied immediately. "But I would be careful not to prove them right in the process." "That's exactly what we're doing," Sarah said softly. "We're proving that human ingenuity can solve problems that Alliance technology cannot. We're showing that human adaptability can find solutions where rigid thinking fails. And if you're discovered," Sarah's smile was sharp, "then the galaxy will learn what humans can really do when they stop asking for permission." Back on Earth, deep beneath the Swiss Alps, scientists worked in laboratories that officially didn't exist. Dr. Maria Santos, Ray's younger sister, led a team developing what they called asymmetric defense systems. While the Alliance focused on bigger ships and more powerful weapons, humans were thinking differently. The key, Maria explained to her team, is that they think like an empire. Big, stable, predictable, but empires have weaknesses that smaller, more adaptive forces can exploit. Her designs look nothing like Alliance technology. Where aliens built massive battle cruisers, humans designed small, fast ships that could strike from unexpected angles. Where aliens relied on energy shields, humans developed armor that absorbed and redirected energy rather than simply blocking it. Most importantly, humans were developing strategies that the Alliance had never encountered because they thought in ways the Alliance couldn't predict. The irony was not lost on any of them. By isolating humanity, the Alliance had freed them from the constraints of galactic law and custom. Humans were now developing technologies and tactics without any consideration for what was acceptable in civilized warfare. As the months passed, more and more alien commanders quietly sought out human advice. The results were always the same. Conflicts that had dragged on for years suddenly resolved in days or weeks. Rebellions ended through clever negotiation rather than bloody suppression. Resource disputes found solutions that benefited all parties rather than creating winners and losers. But in the shadows of space, something else was stirring. Ancient sensors in the dark regions beyond the galactic rim had detected movement. Something vast and patient was beginning to wake up after eons of slumber. The Alliance Intelligence Services, focused on tracking down human smugglers and advisors, had no idea that their isolation of humanity had unknowingly begun preparing the galaxy for its greatest test. In his private chambers, High Chancellor Vextar reviewed reports of unusual activity along the outer rim, ships moving in formations that defied Alliance tactical doctrine, conflicts resolving in ways that made no strategic sense according to conventional wisdom. His aide, a young Saurian named Keshatar, brought him the latest intelligence summary. Chancellor, our analysts believe the humans may be violating the isolation protocol. Vextar's eyes narrowed as he read the report. How? Unknown, sir, but the tactical innovations appearing across our space bear certain similarities to human historical conflicts. Our xenopsychologists believe the influence is too consistent to be coincidental. Then we must act, Vextar decided. Increase patrols along human space. Any vessel attempting to leave their system is to be intercepted and searched. What the Chancellor didn't know was that his decision would accelerate events far beyond his control. Because in the depths of space, something ancient and terrible had finally awakened, and the galaxy's day of reckoning was about to begin. The first sign came from a deep space monitoring station on the edge of Alliance territory. The automated sensors detected something impossible. A fleet of ships emerging from the void between galaxies. Ships unlike anything in Alliance databases, moving in formations that suggested intelligence and purpose. The station's AI sent out an automatic alert, then went silent forever. Humanity's time of isolation was about to end, but not in any way the Zephyr Alliance had imagined. The reckoning storm. The emergency session of the Zephyr Alliance Council convened in absolute chaos. Red alert signals bathed the crystal dome in pulsing crimson light as delegates shouted over each other in dozens of languages. High Chancellor Vextar's scaled hands trembled as he tried to maintain order. Silence. His voice boomed through the translation systems. The chamber gradually quieted, though the tension remained thick enough to cut. Admiral Korthax of the Alliance First Fleet stood at the central podium, his blue-skinned features grim. Honored delegates, 17 hours ago we lost contact with Deep Space Station Omega-7. When the patrol ship Starlight investigated, they found nothing. No debris, no energy signatures, no trace that the station ever existed. A chill ran through the chamber. Deep space stations were massive installations home to thousands of beings. They didn't simply vanish. Furthermore, the Admiral continued, long-range sensors have detected a fleet of unknown vessels approaching from intergalactic space. Their technology doesn't match anything in our databases. Commander Xyloth's crystalline form flickered with nervous energy. How large is this fleet? Admiral Korthax was quiet for a moment. Conservative estimates suggest over 10,000 ships. Some appear to be larger than our dreadnoughts. The silence that followed was deafening. Dr. Kalin materialized, fully visible, her energy form stabilizing in obvious distress. What do we know about these beings? Very little, the Admiral admitted. They haven't responded to any communication attempts. Their ships emit energy signatures unlike anything we've encountered. Most troubling, they appear to be heading directly for the core systems of Alliance space. High Chancellor Vextar felt the weight of 8 centuries settling on his shoulders. How long until they reach the outer colonies? At their current speed, approximately 2 weeks. Panic erupted throughout the chamber. Delegates from outer system colonies demanded immediate protection. Others suggested diplomatic contact. Still more called for full military mobilization. What none of them knew was that in a hidden observation booth above the main chamber, Ambassador Sarah Chen watched the proceedings with cold satisfaction. The booth officially didn't exist and she officially wasn't there, but the TDI had ways of keeping track of important developments. Her secure communicator vibrated once. A message from Earth. Voidborn confirmed. Protocol 7 successful. Awaiting. Phase 2 authorization. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. Everything was proceeding according to plan. The beings emerging from dark space were called the Voidborn, and humanity had known about them for over a year. Not through official channels, but through the network of human advisors now embedded throughout Alliance space. While helping alien commanders solve local conflicts, human strategists had pieced together ancient historical records that the Alliance had forgotten or dismissed, references to a great darkness from beyond the galaxy. Stories of entire civilizations vanishing without trace, warnings carved into the ruins of dead worlds, all pointing to the same conclusion. Something terrible lived in the void between galaxies, and it returned every few million years to feed. The Feo Alliance, comfortable in their technological superiority, had dismissed these records as primitive mythology. Humans, accustomed to learning from history's darkest chapters, had taken them very seriously indeed. Captain Ray Santos stood on the bridge of his ship, but the Defiance looked very different now. The cargo hauler facade had been stripped away, revealing military-grade armor and weapon systems that no Alliance database contained. Around him, dozens of other ships dropped their own disguises. All ships, this is Admiral Chen. Sarah's voice came through secure channels. The Voidborn have arrived ahead of schedule. Operation Silent Storm is now active. You know your assignments. Ray's crew worked with practiced efficiency. They had drilled for this moment hundreds of times in the asteroid bases hidden throughout the outer system. Every human ship in space had been preparing for this day. Helm, set course for Kepler Station, Ray ordered. Best speed. Sir, that's deep in Alliance space. If we're detected, we won't be detected, Ray said confidently. Not until we want to be. The first battle between the Alliance and the Voidborn took place at the mining colony of Epsilon Eridani. The Alliance fleet, confident in their superior technology, met the unknown enemy in traditional formation. Energy weapons that could shatter asteroids simply absorbed into the Voidborn ship's dark hulls. Shields that had never failed flickered and died under weapons that seemed to drain energy rather than transfer it. In 6 hours, the Alliance lost half their fleet. The survivors retreated in disorder, carrying tales of impossible ships that consumed light itself and crews that fought with coordination no living beings should possess. The news reached the capital within hours, sending fresh waves of panic through the council chambers. Emergency defense plans were activated, but Alliance military doctrine had remained unchanged for centuries. They prepared to fight the Voidborn the same way they fought everyone else. It was a disaster waiting to happen. Commander Xyloth found himself in charge of Kepler Station's defense, desperately trying to coordinate a response with resources that were clearly inadequate. The station was a major trading hub, home to over 2 million beings from across the galaxy. If it fell, the inner systems would be next. Sir? His communications officer reported. We're receiving a priority transmission. Audio only, encoded. With human encryption? Xyloth's crystalline form dimmed with confusion. Human? That's impossible. Put it through. The voice that came through the speakers was calm and professional. Commander Xyloth, this is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Initiative. I believe you need our help. Admiral Chen? Xyloth's form brightened with recognition. You were the human ambassador. How are you? That's not important right now, Sarah interrupted. What matters is that we know how to fight the Voidborn, and you don't. Are you willing to listen? Xyloth looked around his command center at the officers frantically trying to organize defenses that everyone knew would fail. We're listening. Good. First, forget everything you know about conventional tactics. The Voidborn aren't like any enemy you've faced. They don't think like living beings because they're not truly alive. They're more like a natural disaster with intelligence. On screens around the command center, tactical displays began updating with information that hadn't been there moments before. Ship positions, energy readings, movement predictions all appeared as if by magic. How are you accessing our systems? Xyloth demanded. We've been here longer than you think, Sarah replied. Commander, your people have spent the last year unknowingly preparing for this battle. Every conflict you've won using innovative tactics in the past 12 months, those were human strategies designed to teach your forces how to fight asymmetrically. The truth hit Xyloth like a physical blow. The mining rebellion on Nexus Prime, the resource dispute at Titan's Gate, the pirate raids in the Outer Spiral, all resolved using human tactical doctrine, Sarah confirmed. Your people learned to think flexibly, to adapt quickly, to use enemy strengths against them. Skills you're going to need if you want to survive the next few hours. Outside Kepler Station, space began to darken as the Voidborn fleet approached. The ships were like holes cut out of reality itself, absorbing light and radio waves and leaving nothing but emptiness behind. Admiral, Xyloth said quietly, even with human tactics, we're outnumbered 50-1. Numbers don't matter against the Voidborn, Sarah replied. They think as a collective consciousness, perfect coordination, but absolutely no adaptability. They expect you to fight like the Alliance has always fought. Big ships, direct confrontation, overwhelming firepower. And instead? Instead, you're going to fight like humans. The battle for Kepler Station began not with the massive energy exchanges typical of Alliance warfare, but with something the Voidborn had never encountered. Misdirection. Captain Ray Santos led the first wave of ships not toward the enemy fleet but around them. While the Voidborn advanced on the station in perfect formation, human-advised Alliance forces struck at their supply lines, communication relays, and support vessels. The Voidborn consciousness, accustomed to direct confrontation, was slow to adapt. By the time they realized the true nature of the attack, Alliance forces had already withdrawn to secondary positions. Wave 2, execute, Sarah's voice commanded. This time, the attack came from below the galactic plane, where no spacefaring, civilization-built bases or expected threats. Modified mining equipment, guided by human tactical thinking, delivered payloads that disrupted Voidborn ship formations. Commander Xyloth watched in amazement as the seemingly unstoppable enemy fleet began to show confusion. Ships collided as their perfect coordination failed. Energy weapons fired at empty space as their targeting systems tried to compensate for attacks from impossible angles. This is incredible, he breathed. They don't know how to respond to chaos. Exactly, Sarah replied. The Voidborn have consumed countless civilizations, but they've never faced an enemy that thrives on unpredictability. Every other species, they've encountered fights logically, systematically, predictably, and humans don't. Sarah's laugh carried an edge that made Xyloth's crystalline form flicker. Commander, we're the species that invented guerrilla warfare, asymmetric tactics, and the art of winning battles we had no business surviving. The Voidborn picked the wrong galaxy to invade. The turning point came when Captain Ray Santos made a decision that violated every principle of military logic. As the Voidborn flagship approached Kepler Station's main docking bay, Ray ordered his ship to ram it directly. The Defiance, struck the massive void-borne vessel at full speed. But instead of the expected mutual destruction, something else happened. The human ship's experimental armor didn't simply absorb the impact energy. It converted it into an electromagnetic pulse that cascaded through the void-borne fleet's collective consciousness. For the first time in eons, the void-borne experienced something they had never felt: confusion, fear, doubt. Ray Santos died in the collision, but his sacrifice created the opening the defenders needed. Alliance forces, guided by human tactical doctrine and fighting with human determination, pressed their advantage. The Voidborn, faced with an enemy that refused to behave logically, began to retreat. High Chancellor Vextar stood in his private chambers watching reports of the impossible victory at Kepler Station. His worldview, built over centuries of assumed superiority, crumbled as he realized the truth. A door chimed behind him. Sarah Chen entered without waiting for permission, no longer wearing the simple diplomatic attire he remembered. Her new uniform bore insignia of rank that the Alliance didn't recognize. "Chancellor," she said politely, "we need to talk." How did you get past my security?" "The same way we've been moving through your space for the past year," Sarah replied. "Vextar, the isolation protocol you imposed on humanity was the best thing that ever happened to us." The old Saurian's eyes narrowed. "How so?" "It freed us from your regulations, your oversight, your way of thinking. While you were congratulating yourselves on containing the dangerous humans, we were preparing for the war you didn't even know was coming." Sarah activated a holographic display showing the current tactical situation across Alliance space. Human ships appeared throughout the galaxy, not dozens, but thousands. All had been hiding in plain sight, disguised as cargo haulers, mining, ships, and private transports. Every human advisor you thought was violating the isolation protocol was actually part of a carefully orchestrated preparation for this moment, she continued. "We knew the Voidborn were coming because we studied the histories you dismissed as mythology. We embedded our people with your forces because we knew you'd need to learn how to fight differently." Vextar sank into his chair, the weight of his mistake crushing down on him. "You used our own prejudices against us. We used your arrogance against you," Sarah corrected. "You assumed you knew everything worth knowing about warfare. You assumed your technology made you superior to any threat. You assumed humans were too primitive to contribute anything meaningful to galactic civilization. And in doing so, we blinded ourselves to the greatest threat our galaxy has ever faced." Sarah nodded. "The Voidborn have consumed entire galactic civilizations before, Chancellor. Species far more advanced than the Alliance. Do you know why they failed where we succeeded?" Vextar looked up at her, ancient eyes filled with understanding and regret. "Because they fought like you do," Sarah continued. "Logically, predictably, with overwhelming technology and conventional tactics. The Voidborn evolved to counter exactly that kind of warfare. But humans fight differently. We fight dirty," Sarah said with a slight smile. "We fight scared. We fight with everything we have, using whatever works, regardless of whether it's fair or honorable or follows the accepted rules of civilized warfare." Over the following days, the war against the Voidborn continued across a dozen star systems. In every battle, the pattern was the same. Alliance forces fighting with human tactics and human advisors achieved impossible victories against overwhelming odds. The galaxy watched in amazement as the species they had mocked and isolated proved to be their salvation. On the final day of the war, Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the TDI flagship Unconquerable, watching as the last Voidborn ships retreated into dark space. Around her, officers from a dozen species worked in harmony, united by shared purpose and human tactical doctrine. "Admiral," her communications officer reported, "we're receiving a transmission from the Zephyr Alliance capital. High Chancellor Vexatar requests permission to speak with you." "Put him through." The elderly Saurian appeared on screen, his proud bearing replaced by something Sarah had never seen in him before: humility. "Admiral Chen," he began formally, "on behalf of the Zephyr Alliance, I offer our deepest apologies for our treatment of humanity. We were wrong. About your people, about your potential, about the threat we all faced. Accepted, Chancellor, Sarah replied simply. More than that, Vextar continued, we formally request that humanity join the Alliance as an equal partner. Not as subjects or junior members, but as leaders. Your tactical genius saved us all. Sarah was quiet for a moment, considering her response. When she spoke, her words would be remembered for generations. Chancellor, we accept your apology and your offer, but with conditions. The new alliance will be truly equal, with decisions made collectively rather than by ancient hierarchies. Every species will contribute their unique strengths rather than conforming to a single model of civilization. Agreed, Vextar said immediately. And, Sarah continued with a slight smile, the name will change. The Zephyr Alliance is dead. Long live the United Species Coalition. Across the galaxy, beings who had never imagined humans as anything more than primitive warriors watched as Earth's representatives took their place as protectors and leaders of galactic civilization. The species that had been mocked for their chaos and unpredictability had proven that sometimes chaos was exactly what the universe needed. In the months that followed, human tactical academies opened on dozens of worlds. Alien officers learned to think flexibly, to embrace uncertainty, to find strength in diversity rather than uniformity. The Voidborn would return someday. The ancient records were clear about that. But when they did, they would face not a complacent empire but a coalition that had learned to fight with human heart and human ingenuity. They had laughed at the human ban. Now they understood that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or their numbers, but their refusal to accept that any fight was truly hopeless. The galaxy was stronger for their presence, and the darkness between stars would find no easy prey the next time it came calling. In the end, isolation had not contained humanity's dangerous nature. It had concentrated it, refined it, and turned it into the weapon that saved them all.